Who put this information in there? Like, where did that constant of the speed of light come from? Where did the gravitational constant come from? Like, who put that information within these base elements to give them the information necessary to produce these things that we see, right? Who made the laws to begin with, right? Okay. So you mentioned that you grew up in the UK?
Yeah.
Whereabouts in the UK?
I grew up in Gravesend, and then I lived in London for 3 years.
Oh, okay. So like main city kind of area.
Yeah.
Okay. And then your family is Muslim. They're practicing?
No, my parents were never religious. My mother grew up Catholic, and then because where my parents grew up, there was a lot of effort to convert the Indians from to Christianity.
Right.
So a lot of people who were Hindu or Muslim, a lot of them ended up being converted.
Okay. So then, did they ever end up converting, or did they just remain like non-religious?
My parents were always non-religious. My father.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he was raised Catholic.
He was raised Catholic. Did he ever? Can you check to see if the? Good. So he was raised Catholic.
Yeah.
He was raised Catholic, but did he ever ascribe to that belief system, or?
No, not really.
No?
Maybe when I was a kid, but ever since he's never been a religious person.
Okay. And like you mentioned for yourself, did you ever look into it? Did you ever think about what your role in this whole situation is?
I thought about it. It's just that I went to a church. I've been to church before when I was a kid, but I never really liked it much.
Can I ask you why you didn't like it
I
particularly?
guess it didn't seem I guess it didn't seem interesting. You know, when I was there, they just read, and then you stand, sit, and then maybe you sing, but that's it. It didn't feel like the message made sense to me, I guess.
Okay.
Bible.
The church that you went to, did they believe in like the Trinitarian version of God?
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas Islam, there is only one God.
Right. Yeah, it's just Allah. It's a purely monotheistic religion.
You say in your Shahada, right?
Yes, exactly. So, with regards to Christianity, though, they are more so what we would call shirk or polytheism or idol worship, because they're taking God, which is undivisible, and dividing him into three, but they're one, but somehow they still remain three.
That never made sense to me.
Yeah, because I came from a Protestant background as well, and they had that same belief about three being one, but not being three but one. And as a young boy, I didn't really understand that. I didn't understand how somebody born of a woman is somehow God, because to me, anybody that's born isn't God, because
Right.
God isn't born.
God couldn't be born if God was there before.
Exactly, because as you know, in Islamic belief, God is eternal, right? He's from the beginning, and he had no beginning, and he has no end, right? And everything is dependent on him, but Jesus was dependent on his mother Mary for breast milk, to clean himself, to use the washroom at that time. When he grew up, he was dependent on food, dependent on water, dependent on air to live, and all of these things. And even, they claim that he died, where we don't believe that, because we believe that he was saved from such a embarrassing, tormental death.
He was raised by Allah.
Yeah, Allah raised him back up to himself, and he's going to come back, and he's going to tell the Christians, I never told you to worship me. Because all throughout the Bible, there's not one clear statement where Jesus says, worship me, or that I am God, or did he ever preach a Trinity, right? This is stuff that other people attribute to him, or other people teach, like the false apostle Paul, for example, who came with all of these beliefs that are contradictory to Jesus, right? So it's something interesting to think about. But for yourself, what's your idea? Do you believe in a creator? Do you believe in God? What's your...
I guess I don't really have a belief one way or the other, because I guess for me, myself, I didn't really think... I didn't know that... I couldn't say I could prove there is no God, but I couldn't prove that there is either. So...
Okay.
And that's where I guess I fell on it, but I was open to it, at least about learning.
Okay.
About Islam and other religions.
Okay, that's good that you came here then, because this is a place to learn. One thing that we put forward to people is that, what's your idea of evidence, right? Because, for example, there's things in your life that you hold to a standard of evidence, and you take it to be as truth, even though it's not necessarily a standard that you use in other areas. And I'll give you an example. You believe that your dad is your dad and your mother is your mom, right?
Sure.
Have you ever performed a paternity test to prove it as such?
I see what you mean.
Right? So like you base your belief that they are your parents based off of other inferences, like their witness testimony that I'm your dad and I'm your mom, or like you may have some features that look like either of them, may have some personality traits that go back to them, right? So these things for you are like, oh, I can see that they're my parents. I don't need to have a level of skepticism there that makes me not believe it as such, right?
Okay.
So for that being the case, then uh, would you accept testimony about God?
Well, yeah. Well, I like to. Well, of course, you always want to hear, especially from a person who wants to talk to you about whichever religion, whether it's Islam or any other religion, what their experience was. If I may ask, when you what led you to revert from Protestant to Islam?
That's a good question for me. Like I said when I was a young boy, I didn't find the Trinity making sense. I didn't find the idea that Jesus being somehow three and one with God in this Trinity being sense, or that he's somehow God, or because there's places where Jesus says the Father is greater than I, the Father is greater than all. He says, of my own self, I can do nothing. So this doesn't make sense for you to attribute lordship to Jesus when he can't do anything himself. A God doesn't do that, right? Other things like Jesus not claiming that he's the last and final messenger. He said, there's many things that I want to say unto you, but ye cannot bear it now. Howbeit, when he, the Spirit of truth, shall come, he shall guide you unto all truth. He shall not speak of himself. Also shall he hear, he shall speak. He shall glorify me. He shall tell you of things to come. So he's not only saying that he hasn't finished what he wanted to tell you, but he's saying that there's a Spirit of truth that will come after, and he will guide you unto all truth. And the likeness of Jesus is the same as Adam, right? The way that God created Adam from, materials that he had, the ability to, like dust, like dirt, like clay, all of these things are told us that this is how Allah created Adam. Same way, Jesus was created by the very, the conscious effort of God saying, be it and is, right? So the same way that we would assume that that Adam is not necessarily anywhere special, it's just a miraculous creation of God. Same way we believe Jesus to be a miraculous creation of God. But further than that, for myself, like when I started to see that, Jesus says in John 17:3, for example, that this is eternal life, that they may know you, the Father, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent. So Jesus says that the Father is the only true God, right? So it's a very opposite idea to what Christianity says today, where they're saying, no, Jesus is God. But Jesus is saying the Father is the only true God. Who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe Jesus, or are you going to believe the church fathers or Paul or these other people? I want to follow the person that we all agree is a prophet, who is Jesus, right? But that was not the end of my story. I kind of when I started to feel like there was an incongruence between what the church was teaching me and what the Bible was showing me,
Yeah.
I didn't really feel like I could believe in this anymore, right? So I kind of just showed up to church for show, just to make my family happy, right? And I always had these Bible verses in the back of my mind, and I'd ask my questions to my pastors, and they never really gave sufficient answers, right? The response was always, you just have to believe. You just have to believe that Jesus died for your sins. You're going to heaven. You're good, right? And I'm like, no, I'm too curious for that. I need to know like the exact understanding that I'm looking for to know what the nature of God is, right? Um, but then, so fast forward, I kind of got into to college, to university, and I'm taking philosophy, I'm taking physics, I'm taking studying DNA and these kinds of things. And I saw that there was this great I started to see evidence of a designer. So what I mean by that is, for example, when you look at in physics, for example, I don't know what your educational background is.
Just high school.
High school. So there's some physics you do in there maybe, but in physics you study about the laws of the universe, right? These physics laws like force equals mass times acceleration, etc., or gravitational constant. All of these things, these these constants that we find, for example, the gravitational constant, the constant of the speed of light, these things had to have been there from the beginning of the universe. If they weren't there from the beginning of the universe, we would not find the universe to be displayed the way that it is now, right? we would not be able to fine-tune this universe because you would not be able to stop the fine-tuning if you're claiming that it was naturally selecting over time, which is a preposterous idea to begin with, right? But the idea that there was information in the universe from the beginning, and that's how you're able to predict and see the way that the objects in motion, in space, the way that they move, that's how you're able to tell it or explain it to the best of their ability, of course, because obviously there's still gaps in their narrative. But for the most part, the way that we're able to understand the universe is through these laws that kind of show that there is design and information in the universe that had to be there from the beginning. So me as like a young college student, I'm just wondering, who put this information in there? Like, where did that constant of the speed of light come from? Where did the gravitational constant come from?
Right. So who made the laws to begin with?
Who made the laws to begin with, right? Some people talk about, these laws being God's language, right?
Yes.
This is the way that the information that he's putting in the universe. I found that there is definitely design in the way that the universe has been created and the way that it operates and the way that it continues to exist to today, right? So that was kind of my first introduction into this belief that there is a creator or a designer, but I wasn't convinced like that for sure, because obviously I'm struggling with being an agnostic, perhaps moving towards atheism because of what you're experiencing in these upper level philosophy classes and this kind of thing. But I always kind of had these ideas of like, who put that information in the universe, right? Fast forward to other classes, like if we go into studying DNA, for example, right? When I was studying DNA, these 4 base elements, CTGA, they're in different combinations and they create everything that we see that exists, right? A different combination of CTGA creates the trees. A different combination of CTGA creates the plants and creates the grass and creates the dog and the cat and the monkey and then creates the human being. So I'm thinking like in my head as a young student, right? The same way like me when I was a little kid and I'm playing with Legos, I have the same composition of Legos, maybe a 2x1 piece or a 2x4 piece or a 2x6 piece, but I can create different types of buildings. I can create different types of structures. I can create different types of things that appear to me that I can play with, right? So then I'm thinking this designer, he's using the same base pairs of CTGA and he's able to create these different structures the same way I am as a kid with Legos. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then but in your case, the Legos is on a smaller scale, and then I use that to understand the larger scale, right?
Exactly. So then I'm thinking, okay, not only is that amazing that the same materials are being manipulated to create everything that we see, but then also who put the information in CTGA? Like who put that information within these base elements to give them the information necessary to produce these things that we see, right? So I'm thinking there's another evidence of the creator there, right? There's another kind of evidence that I was studying and learning about, and it was when I was learning about language and evolution, right? So there's 2 camps in this field of evolutionary psychology and language, and they talk about whether language is innate to human beings or if it is evolved in human beings. So there's these 2 camps, right? Now, one camp is saying that language evolved from the time of this ancient ancestor of Australopithecus or whatever, up until the way that they portray evolution, the Neanderthals and then the Homo sapiens till now, right? So they say that language evolved from that, from being very rudimentary vocalizations of right, to Shakespeare. That's their explanation of that, is that it evolved over those thousands of years. But then there's another camp, and this is perpetuated by a linguist by the name of Noam Chomsky. Have you ever heard of this person?
I believe I've heard of him, yes.
So he purports this idea that language is actually innate to human beings. And it's quite interesting when you think about it, because if that is the case, then that means that language didn't evolve. And it also means that human beings were the first people to be able to use language, or the first creation being able to use language, right? So in the side that said it was evolved, there was this lady, I think her name was Suzanne Rochebaum or something. I can't remember exactly. But she wanted to prove that language evolved, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to try and explain the experiment to you best as I can. They had these apes, and they taught these apes sign language, right? So that they could, very elementarily use sign language to express, I want this, I want that, or sit, or whatever, right? And then they taught another ape sign language that was of the opposite sex. And then they allowed those animals, those apes, to mate. So the idea being, in scientific terms, that they were trying to take an animal that had a shared environment of being able to use sign language, and then create an offspring that had a shared gene set that had the propensity to learn sign language, right? And the idea being is that over time, the offspring that would come from these mates would eventually have a baby that was predisposed to be really good at sign language, right? And then they took the experiment further, and they took those babies that they believed to be better at acquiring sign language and put them in human homes. And these humans not only use sign language with these baby apes, but then they also spoke to them in language, like using whatever language. I'm sure it was English, because the study was taken, I believe, in California. So they were speaking to them in English while using sign language, and American Sign Language obviously is in English as well. So that's what I'm thinking. Now, they did this again. So they took these babies that they put in homes with human beings, and they allowed them to be raised up until they were of mature age. Now remember, they had the propensity to learn sign language, and they also learned in the home in an environment that was continuously reinforcing the sign language. And they did this for generations with these apes. The idea being, okay, after a certain amount of time, their hope was we would see changes in the larynx. The larynx is this area in your throat where you produce speech from. And their hope was that they would also see that these apes were better at acquiring language and better at manipulating language compared to their ancestors, right? So what did they see in their findings? They didn't find any such findings. There was no change in the larynx, first of all. Second of all, the ability for these super predisposed apes that had the home of a language speaking home, and then and also predisposed to acquire sign language, were no better than their ancestors at doing such. And not only this, they were no better at language than a 2-year-old toddler at actually differentiating between certain things. So now their belief was, their response to this was, we were not able to actually mimic the effects of evolution through the time period that we had our study. It's going to take a lot longer than that. But me and you, being just regular human beings and not really, involved in this study, can say that you should at least see some difference.
Yeah, you want to see what change it's actually a change.
If there's something, but they didn't see anything. So then this actually, I believe, supports the evidence that language is innate to human beings. And what's interesting for me and you is in the Quran and in the Bible, there's a story about the Prophet Adam, peace be upon him, where Allah, the glorified and exalted, he taught Adam the names of everything, right? And the angels didn't know the names of what Adam was taught, right? Because Allah asked the angels, what's the name of this? And they didn't know. And Adam knew the names because Allah taught him. Now, what's interesting for me and you is what separates us, other than our stature and our different abilities, is this area in our brain, the prefrontal cortex. It's more larger than in us than in other species on the earth, and it actually has areas called Broca's area and Wernicke's area that are associated with speech production and speech recognition. So when me and you are learning about that, and we're thinking, okay, human beings have this area that is related to speech production and speech recognition that is not as profound in the other animals, then the story in the Quran about Adam being taught the names of everything could be that could be the result of that.
آمنت أن الآخرة لا بد يوما آتية كل الخلائق حاضرة كل السرائر بادية